And my goal that year was to break the American record in the 800 meters for the indoor. And we just focused on that goal, that from the fall all the way up to the indoor nationals every day, looked at, I talked to my coach, this is the goal. And we looked at our progress, and we are actually moving closer to that goal. So going into the meet, I was as confident as I ever was. I felt as good as I ever did up to that time. And I ended up breaking the American record.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to another very special interview. And today I get to introduce you to a man named Trinity Gray. I'm so excited to dive into his background. He's got an amazing story. I was joking with him before a little bit that he's way faster than me. And if you haven't listened to Kadivis Robinson's interview, Kadivis actually told me I needed to talk to Trinity, and that's why we're on today. And I'm so excited to just ask questions and get into sprinting and all these sorts of things. Before I'll brag on Trinity a little bit, as I always do with the different guests. He's got to listen a little bit, but Trinity went to Brown University. He's one of the greatest runners in Brown track and field history, one of the most dominant in Ivy League history as well. He is an 8-time All-American. He captured the heptagonal championship in 4 individual events. So this is crazy to me, right? 400 meters, 500 meters, 800, and the 1,000 meters. And then the 3 relays, the 4x400, 4x800, and the distance medley, multiple times in these different events. He still holds a record today at Brown University in 6 individual events and 3 relays. If you look at his background, again, I could go on and on, right? But when you look at after graduation from Brown, right, he ran professionally for 3 years. He won the U.S. ATF National Indoor Championships, running the fastest time by an American in the 800 meters. He's been at the U.S. Olympic trials. I mean, again, I could go on and on. And now he joins me live from Philadelphia, the great city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Trinity, thanks so much for taking time. This is such a great way to start my day.
Yeah, it's good to meet you, Matt. Thanks for the opportunity to join you this morning.
This is great. Well, I love opening these up with a pretty, probably big question, general question. But when you look back at your running days, right, what's one of the greatest memories that you have?
I think the greatest memory I had was my junior year in college. And this was after my semi-breakthrough year as a sophomore, when I ran 1:47 or something like that. And my goal that year was to break the American record in the 800 meters for the indoor. And we just focused on that goal, that, from the fall all the way up to the indoor nationals every day, looked at, I talked to my coach, this is the goal. And we looked at our progress. And, we are actually moving closer to that goal. So going into the meet, I was as confident as I ever was. I felt as good as I ever did up to that time. And I ended up breaking the American record. I was the second American to do it. But for me, I remember my coach coming over to me, and he's thinking that he has to console me. I'm so hurt and everything. But the way I ran is I was a front runner. And what that means is I'm the person that's I'm taking the lead, and I felt uncomfortable running behind someone because I was an 800 meter runner, but I was also really quick. So slowing my body down actually hurt more than it did to push my body in the beginning. And I led the race up until the last probably 30 meters. And I remember my coach coming to me and saying he thought he had to console me, but for me, I achieved my goal. And that's a lot of times what track is about and what sports is about, where, yes, you have this overarching goal, and you can't not think about what your goal was at the end of the day, and kind of like, oh, I lost. Like, okay, you lost, but what did you achieve in that loss? Or what did you learn in that loss? And for me, I ran as fast as I'd ever ran. I ran as fast as any Americans ever ran. It just so happened that somebody had a better day or better 30 meters in their case in the race than I did. So I always look back as that was kind of that moment when I realized that, I belong in that top echelon, and achieving a goal like that, is definitely one of my greatest moments.
That's so good. And I mean, there's so much I want to unpack even just from that story. When one thing that as soon as you said it just popped in my head was kind of around this goal setting. Like, how do we set goals? And like you talked about, right, you kind of have a season goal, but then how do you break it down? And I think it can be a difficult thing as an athlete, right? In any sport, really, of like, how do I set those goals? And it's not too big, it's not too small. It's like, it's the SMART goals, right? That it's achievable, but it's, pushing there's all these things. So from a like track perspective, how did you approach like that goal setting, and how did your coaches work with you to make sure it wasn't like, hey, we're going to set the world record, or that you're like, what? Like, that's so far out there. But how did you balance that?
Well, the one thing that we did every season is we started in August, to say, all right, this is where we're looking to go, and here's the different stops along the way. So, for me, I didn't do cross country as a college athlete. So, the goal was from August, we do this, and we get, if we're here, we had different smaller goals along the way, and it was all leading to kind of our progress towards that larger goal.
Yes.
So it started, months in ahead. You can't have a goal and not really plan out that goal, and having a plan, going back and looking at, okay, this is where we think you should be. This is where you're trending. All of that feedback is important, because then you get to adjust the training, based off of, where you think you should be and where you are. So it's important to have that upfront planning, to kind of have any goal and to achieve any goal.
Yes. I like that. And it sounds like, again, I'm a baseball guy, right? And I, did multiple sports growing up, but that seems like is that like a normal conversation that happens in the track world? Like, because sometimes you bring up goals in other sports and they're like, what? Like, where's this coming from? And especially at individual level, but it seems more common in the track area.
Yeah, because you think about it with track, is you're training for a long time for a short period of time. So, I trained, at that point, about 8 months for a race that took 1 minute and 46 seconds. And if you don't set some type of target, if you go into it and say, I'm just going to train harder than I ever have, I'm just going to, try to do the best workouts I ever have, you can get lost in that 8-month time span, where if you are trending towards something, you have to have the broader goal, but it's not enough just to train harder. You have to, making sure that you're on target to be there on that one time. You only have one time to run that race. There's no give backs. There's no 1 minute and 48 seconds. Either you want to do it in 1 minute 46 seconds and break the American record, or you're not. So you have to have that broader goal, but you have to have those smaller goals in between until you get to that one showtime. When it's time to run, you don't have a second chance.
I think you're right. I love that. It's like that directionally course correction, however you want to look at it, of you at least know you're moving in the right direction. It's too vague, like you said, to say, well, I'm just going to work hard.
Yeah, it's not enough. It's not enough to work hard.
Enough.
Yeah.
I want to get into your journey to Brown and things like that, but I'm curious, before we go there, who's one coach that you had that was, I don't know, just highly influential in your career life? Like, who is that person?
I think the person that I would say was most influential, for me as a person, would be my college coach. Not because my other coaches weren't as influential. I think it's because I was old enough and mature enough to really take in the lessons in that relationship, where growing up, I ran from the age 6 to when I retired at 26. So I ran for a long time. And, I had a great coach as going up in the club track, which was, from that 6 to 18 range. I had great coaches. It's just that in college, I actually formed a more mature bond with my coach. And so I would say, my college coach, Bob Rothenberg was that person.
And did he talk to you in a certain way or approach you a certain way? Like that just, I mean, you have that maturity, right? Which is important, I think, as athletes. You're a little more open. I think as we, mature just as adults, right? I say that in my current role. But did he just have a way with you, or do you think it was a balance of like your openness plus his approach just worked for you?
I think what Berg has, that's kind of what we call him. He had expectations, and he had expectations, but he also had a personality where you felt bad as an athlete to disappoint him. And, so you were running as much for yourself to perform well, but you was running also to make sure that you stand up to his goals for you. And sometimes it was tough because, you felt you had a decent workout, but he, you didn't hit his mark, so you felt bad. But it's really me trying to live up to his expectations because of him as a person. Is not someone that you want to let down, not because of force, because he was just that person that you always wanted to make proud.
Yes. Well, so I'm curious, a thought popped in my head. I'm like, man, how did he do that? Like, how did he, because a lot of times we want to say like, oh, I want my athletes to, work really hard for me, right? And not want to disappoint me, things like that. How did that show up? How did that look? Yeah.
He's a genuine human being where, he leads with his heart. He's the kind of person that does anything for his athletes. And he carries himself as the person that, someone to aspire to. He volunteers his time. He's there late in the evening, early in the morning. He comes prepared to every meeting, with a plan in place. He's recording, we're having conversations. For me, he's like more than a coach, really. He's my father figure where I still talk to him every day. I see him once a year, if not more. I'll travel to Providence and, and go spend some time with him. If we formed that bond, way beyond track. But he was really the person because of who he held himself to be. You aspire to be just as dedicated as he was. It's more, he's just a regular person, but he did it in such a way that, made other people want to be like him. It's just some of those people in the world where you look at him like, wow, this is the kind of person I aspire to be. And as a coach, you take that human element, and now he's a coach where he has some authority over you. So not only do you want to, look at him as a person, now you don't want to disappoint that person, the person you look up to so much.
I like that. Yeah, because it sounds like him as he's prepared. First of all, he leads with the heart, like he actually cares.
Yeah.
And with that, because he cares, he's going to make sure he's showing up prepared, that he's coming alongside you to show those goals. And if you're matching that, right, or giving the effort, then he's going to stay alongside you, right? Because he cares genuinely.
Exactly.
And that goes a long way.
It goes a long way. And I remember like one story, like after that race I told you about, one of my greatest races I felt at the time, like a lot of coaches was in his ear saying, oh, Trinity should have went out slower this, he should have did this. So, and he took in all of that, and he came to me and he was like, well, we should do this, make all these changes. You got to slow down the first lap and so forth. And I remember having a conversation with him. This was the most painful conversation in terms of afterwards. Felt so bad. But I remember saying to him, it's not my responsibility to make my first lap slower. It's your responsibility to make my second lap faster. And the silence in the room was deafening. Like, we didn't talk for a week, but then he came back and said, you know what, Trinity, you're right. We need to work on some of your the areas where you're weak, but not forget who you are as a person. And, to have a coach to be able to take that in from an athlete, think about it, and then come back and say, all right, how can we work together, based off of that, and not filter out the noise. That takes a certain type of person to put down his pride and his years of experience and say, you know what, Trinity's a different athlete. I'm going to adjust to his strengths. So that's kind of
Yes.
the kind of person he is.
Well, and, you even look at that too. You knew, looking at the way you ran, like you knew the kind of the answer, right? Of like, you like to be out front, but how did you know that like it was the second lap that was the problem?
Because people already caught me on the second lap.
That's good.
That was the lap where, either I won or I lost. And the way I ran is if I didn't have a good first lap and if I didn't put distance on people, I gave them an opportunity to catch up. And I think it's difficult being a front runner because you don't have anything to gauge off of. You are the gauge for yourself. And, I think that, we had a strategy in the race. You think a lap around the track, you just run. No, you don't. You have a strategy on what you're going to do at each part of the race. I think the one thing that, we didn't have as much, I think when I look back on it, is we didn't train to race or you didn't practice the same way you expect to run in a meet. And so what I mean by that is, if I want to be able to, pick up speed in the middle of a race, I need to be doing workouts where in the middle of a set, I'm changing speeds, I'm adjusting my body. And a lot of people, when they're practicing, it's like, all right, I just need to do a 300 in 39 seconds. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's how you do that 39 seconds that matter, because you can't train one way, get into a race and think everything's going to change. Your body's used to a certain way of doing things. So when I look back, I think that's the one thing that I missed. And I think that's the one thing where if we had that knowledge where, Brown wasn't like a top school, Berg did a lot talking to a lot of people to get me to where I got, where I was able to achieve. But I think if we had that extra information, that would have definitely helped that second.
Yes.
It just has to.
Oh, that's interesting. Now you're taking me back to Kadivas's interview too, and he said that's one of the things they're trying to doing at TCU right now, right? And they did at Ohio State with him. He did as a coach of practice the way you want to run, and
exactly.
And it's all those constant learnings, right? That I look back from a baseball perspective too, and it's like, man, if I would have like the different approaches and all these things they know now, right? Which 10 years from now, they're going to know something way more different than we know now, right?
Different now. Yeah, the science of sports right now is crazy.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that aspect of it. So walk me through, Trinity. What was your path to get to Brown? Like what was, you started running at 6, but what was that path that ultimately led you there?
Well, I ran age group track. So basically in the summers, every from 9 to 10 ran together, 11 to 12 ran together. And I was typically one of the top in the nation in my sport. However, I decided to go to a small high school. And my high school is right around the corner from a larger high school with a similar name. So I went to a high school, Franklin Learning Center, and the larger high school with a bigger track team was Benjamin Franklin. So in my senior year, I'm expecting at this point, I'm one of the top prospects coming in junior year. I'm doing great. I expect to get letters after letters after letters. I had nothing. Nothing.
Really?
Nothing. The only person that reached out to me was the University of Pennsylvania, Brown, because Bob, my coach, Berg, he watched me run from age 8 to 18 at a meet that he held every year. So he got to see me go from a kid to a young man down to an adult. So he's been in my life for, almost 40 years, which is amazing to see that he's seen me grow that much, but no one reached out to me. And for me, I was at the point where I was like, I'm not going to somewhere where I got to ask them to join. I got to apply without getting a scholarship and all this stuff. I just felt
Yeah.
I was too good. And
Yes.
then turning down, I'm going to Brown. Like, if I remember a coach from Seton Hall, after I accepted the Browns, like, all right, well, you can call me after you're not running well. I was like, well, if I don't run well at Brown, I don't care. I'll just run after I graduate. Like, for me, I had the attitude where I felt that I was good enough not to have to, chase a school. I felt they should be coming to me. And that was
Yes.
the best decision that I didn't have to make, because what I gained from going to Brown beyond athletics and later on, having Berg there to save my life, if I would have chose to go somewhere else, maybe I would have ran faster, but maybe we wouldn't have this conversation as well. So, things work out for their own reason.
That's amazing. I want to dive into kind of that statement of, him saving your life. Before I go there, when you think back, like, what was the biggest adjustment between like high school running and then making that transition to the collegiate level for you?
I think for me, it was the amount of work you have to do. Like high school running, I was naturally talented, so I worked hard. Trust me, I worked hard, but the amount of extra work you have to do on top of the work you did as a high school runner, I think that was the biggest thing. And for me, like graduating, I was number 6 in the nation in terms of high school in the 400 meters and number 8 in the 800. I could have gone either way, but I knew Brown's sprint team was very bad, and if I was going to do anything, it would be in the 800.
Yes.
So that meant that I had to be both fast, but also I had to be, build up my strength. So I had to go from running barely over 20 miles a week to up to 40, 60 miles a week. So it's just kind of that amount of, work that you got to put in is so much more, for me. Now, I think where some people get things a little screwy is they do too much work in high school. They do too much work as a youth. And when they go to college, there's not a lot more they can do. And that's when you see those people who have great prospects going into college, but then they plateau because, as a young person, your body's naturally is going to develop. You have to pull back a little bit sometimes how much you work, because you're going to get that work later on. And if you overdo it, you can push your body for so long before it begins to reverse and start to shut down. One thing my coaches did as a youth is they didn't race me too much. They didn't train me too much, because the bigger picture was college and potentially as a professional athlete.
Yes. That's a really interesting point too, right? Because I think it's not a bad thing, but when you elevate to the different levels, right? It's just a different level of work, focus. I don't know, just the energy you spend goes up just because it's becoming more of I don't want to say job, but it starts to become that career, it's your thing. It's your thing, right? That you spend most of your time on.
It's your thing. Exactly.
That's interesting. One question I have for you, I like talking about this topic around confidence, right? Of how do we show up confident? And every athlete I've talked to so far, I've experienced it myself. There are moments where our confidence is challenged, and it doesn't necessarily go away. It might be in a moment. It might be a day. It might be a significant period of time, right? Whatever it is, it's different for every athlete. But did you ever experience, I don't know, just those confidence challenges? And if you did, like, how did you work through them to just keep moving forward?
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course, certainly, confidence can affect me in a couple of ways. One, most of the time is if I'm at a race, if I'm, about to run and I know that I wasn't hitting my workouts right, or, for some reason I'm not feeling right. You're on that line. You have, less than 2 minutes to complete a race, and going on the line and not feeling confident kills you. And, as a professional, I trained by myself, and a lot of times I felt stepping to the line where, I I would think back on how the practice went. I think back on all those things that, I shouldn't be thinking on, and that kills your confidence. And today, which is great, I didn't have that, the mental health, resources that they have today. And,
Yep.
For me, being that front runner, I had to be in the right mindset. If I stepped on the line and I'm thinking about something other than, my race and just getting around the track and, how I plan to perform versus what I did leading up to the performance, that impacts the way my race runs out. And sometimes that would happen to me where, if I, leading up to that race, if I didn't have the practices that I wanted or something felt funny, I'm in my head. And those are the races where I didn't perform well because I have to be clear as much as anything because of the way I ran. So yeah, I definitely had that. The resources that people have now is great.
Yes.
I encourage anyone to utilize those resources because that's going to be the difference, between, being great and being good. And
Yes.
think about the Olympics with Noah Lyles. That was the difference between gold and silver. Having that conversation with his therapist, talking through those doubts, walking in with that confidence. That's why he won, because he expected to win. He went into that mindset. So the resources today are a lot greater, than it was back then. And certainly I encourage everyone to utilize that mental
Yes.
health resources they have.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Where sometimes if you just say it out loud, what you're thinking to someone else or maybe to yourself in a room, in a mirror, like whatever, just saying it
takes a load off your shoulders.
Takes a load off, right? It's just simple things, right? It doesn't have to be this complex, lay on a couch and let's overanalyze your life and all that sort of stuff. Let's just say it and
get it out your head, because as long as it's in your head, it's going to weigh down. It's going to weigh you down. You're not helping anyone keeping things inside. Just let it out. Even if you just talk to a friend, just get it out your head. And as much as possible, get the help you need to learn how to deal with that type of stress in your life.
Yes. And I'm curious, the next question that popped in my head was around routines. What was your, I don't know, go-to, I'm about to get in the block and all right, start the race, but I'm about to go to the line. Did you have a specific routine that you had kind of leading up to that, or was it just depending on the day?
No, the routine, like so far, running a middle distance race is hard to be like a Noah where you come out, like it's not that exciting coming in when you're starting. So, my routine was really around my warm up. It was, about an hour, 15 hour and a half before my race, get my stuff. And that whole process of warming up was that routine where you're getting yourself hyped and you're getting yourself ready. And because of the distance, unfortunately, it's only so much. You don't want to go in too excited because it's only 2 laps is too long to be excited for. But yeah, that routine was the warm up. And it is, I think, for a lot of people in that distance race is you're kind of taking yourself through the cycles, getting yourself mentally prepared because you do that warm up every day. And that's kind of your routine to focus for your workout, for your race, for whatever you want to do for that day.
Yes. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. To your point, right? Of, the 100 meters versus 400 to 800 or, even 200, it's way different from a height perspective because come out of the gate too hot in a long distance run, like you could be in trouble.
Yeah. Most times you will be in trouble. Exactly.
So interesting. Let's go back to your coach, Berg. You made the comment of he saved your life, and I want to give a little flavor. Can you tell a little bit about like what you mean by that, and just how you got to that point? Share with our watchers and listeners.
So I didn't know this, but I was born with a tumor, craniopharyngioma, that typically shows itself in adolescence. So you usually as an adolescent, you see the signs, and it's a debilitating tumor, not because it's cancerous or anything. It's wrapped around your midbrain and your optical nerve. So for me, after having the surgery, they had to remove some of my pituitary gland, which controls my hormones. It damaged my optical nerve, so I'm legally blind. It has a lot of impact. That surgery itself really impacts a person's body functions in terms of how your body functions, because without the proper hormone levels and so forth, I went from I doubled my weight after my surgery because my body doesn't know that it's storing too much fat, because my equilibrium is off because of that surgery. So for me, I was fortunate to be able to have an adolescence, be able to run track, travel the world. But when I was 30 years old, I had a seizure for the first time on my mother's couch. And at that point, Bert, he's always been in my life, since running. And, first person she called while we were going to the hospital, she called Bert. He handed the phone to his wife. He drives down from Rhode Island. And at the time, went to a local hospital. You grow up thinking that the doctors know what they're doing. And my mom, she just trusted the doctors, and this hospital was fully equipped for, my condition, my psychosis. They had me in a room with nobody watching me, only my mother. And Berg was able to be that common presence. He was able to, what he did is he called around to different alumni for advice and for recommendations. And, because my mother couldn't take me out that hospital because they can do this code where they can restrain you against your will or something. I don't know what it was, but, so eventually he called the coach from the University of Pennsylvania who had a friend who worked at the hospital, which is one of the better hospitals in Philadelphia. He called his friend got me a bed, and I got the help that I needed. I thought I was going to die in that first hospital. It's just where I was and how I felt at the time. And if I didn't go to Brown, who knows who would have made that call for me? Because growing up, we don't know, you go in, you trust the doctors. You don't have that capability to call someone at the University of Pennsylvania, one of the best hospitals in the region, to get you a bed at a better location. Yes. So for me, I think him handing the phone off to his wife as soon as he knows that I'm going to the hospital, driving 4.5 hours to be by my side for a week nonstop. That's the kind of person. You ask me who Berg is, that's Berg. And that's why as an athlete, you want to live up. You don't want to disappoint a person like that. And, I owe kind of, being able to recover and be alive, based on his decision and his ability to get me to the right place. So that's why I said he's really saved my life. So that decision that, people not recruiting me or, sending it to the wrong high school, whatever happened, it happened. Everything happens for a reason. And for me, that reason really kind of showed itself, many years down the road.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
The just love and caring he had for you in that moment to come down, like you said, to drive that way. Yeah. I'm almost speechless, hearing that story, and then to do what it takes to figure it out. It's it's almost like him back on the track being like, okay, what the goal is this. So what are the steps and who do I need to call?
What does Trinity need to get better? Let me call this person. Let me call that person. And, at the end of the day, it's, because he was there, I was able to get the help that I needed, in the time that I needed that help, where
yes,
it's one of those things in life where, it may, sometimes, and when an athlete don't go to that school they want to go to, or, get the accolades or whatever it is, it's not always a bad thing because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. The key is to make the most out of where you are. Was I always happy at Brown? Did I look at other schools and see how much they had and we didn't? It's an Ivy school, with a small track. So yeah, sometimes it didn't, I thought I should have more, but being there in the long term is something that, saved me and was there for me years later. So as an athlete, don't feel bad when you don't get to those top programs, or you have to settle for, or feel like you have to settle for something less than. Just take advantage of the situation, because you never know how that's going to impact your life down the road.
It's so good. That's such great advice. How is, going through the surgery and now you kind of on the other side, and again, it's impacted your sight and all those sorts of things. I'm just curious, has your perspective on, I don't know, life shifted, or is it the same, or like?
It's similar to, as an athlete, it's always like, you always take that mindset of, this is where we are today. It's kind of that planning we talked about, in August, after the surgery, you got to reassess. This is where I am today. This is where I want to go. I knew that I wanted to get back and go to start working again. Like, I was out of work for 18 months. I probably should have been out of work for maybe longer than that, but I knew that I wanted to get back into, start working and start my career, because, I could have not worked for the rest of my life. That's kind of, my condition, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So you kind of take that approach to say, all right, well, here's my first step. I took my first job that was 3.5 hours each way travel. I used to leave at 4:30 in the morning, get home around 9 o'clock at night. And I could barely stay awake. This is like 18 months from 2 brain surgeries. I could barely stay awake, throughout the process. But I knew that this is what I had to do to get to where I wanted to go. And, I did that for 6 months, eventually reduced my commute down to an hour and a half, eventually got my commute all the way down to about 30 minutes. But if I didn't take that first step with the long-term goal in mind, I could have been still, at a place where, I didn't want to be, because I was afraid to take that first step and to have that forward-looking mindset that athletes have to have. Like, today is only one step towards the end goal. And if you don't approach sports that way, approach life that way, you're kind of caught up in the moment.
Yes. Well, I mean, I just love your attitude. Like, it blows me away of like how you choose every day to do this. And I'm not saying it's easy, and I don't have that perspective, and I'm sure it's not easy. But just like, where does that come from? That you're just like, I'm just doing this. Like, I'm not settling. Like, where does that come from?
It's kind of that front runner mentality, like that's just that's like, I always believe that, there's always, I approach life where things happen for a reason. And, I'm just going to keep pushing. I'm going to run my race. And like, yes, running from the front, as an athlete wasn't the easiest thing, and coming back from something that's, very difficult long term, is not the easiest thing, but you have to have belief in yourself. Like, for me, I believe in my first part of my race. I thought that, being a front runner, that was my strength. And that's how I live. And for me, I believe that, kind of, what I bring to the table professionally, I believe that myself, and now as a professional, my strength is the ability to endure, the ability to communicate, the ability to form relationships with people. So I'm going to utilize that as much as possible to get as far as I can, and not really dwell on the things that I don't have. The ability, what I don't have is the ability to drive, the ability to travel. So I'm limited in what I can do. However, the things that I can do, I'm going to do it 100%. And it kind of carries over to the way I approach track. What things you can do, things you can control, you do it. And the things you can't, figure out a way to get it done, to complete the race.
trademark front runner mentality.
It's only one way to do it. It's only one way to do it. You know, like,
I'm picturing like a T-shirt in my mind, like front runner mentality, and it's that attitude. It's control the controllables. It's focus on what you do have versus what you don't have. And here's the deal, Trinity. Right? It's easy to say.
Yeah.
It can be challenging to do.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about you. Like in KD connecting us, because like, you're doing it. You're the example. You're in, I think, such a powerful part of life. Let's take this away from sports for a minute, just life, right? And it impacts sports, of sure, but perspective.
Yeah.
It's like, what's your perspective? And that's why I love these interviews, because it's like your story is different than my story, different than KD's story, different than every person I talk to.
Yeah.
But it provides a perspective on like what's really important in the grand scheme of things. Like
exactly.
And that can help you perform better.
Yeah, it can help you perform better, live better, achieve more things. You know, so much that it can do for you. But you have to know who you are as a person and work towards those strengths at the end of the day. You know, if you forget that, you know, and kind of want to be something else, it's going to be a lot difficult. You know, I didn't win all my races. You know, I won a lot of races. You know, I can say that, you know, I was the fastest American for 2.5 years up until I got injured. Do I say I had a bad career? No. Do I have all the accolades that some other people have? No. You know, but for me, what was important to me, I remember my coach asking me, what would you rather have, the world record or an Olympic medal? For me, I wanted to have the world record because that means that I was the best ever. Now, the Olympic medal is great because that means that you're the best in that one race and you're the top. But there's an Olympic medal every 4 years. There's a new medalist every 4 years. There's not a new world record holder every 4 years. And for me, that was I guess the way I saw things. It was less about, you know, having that one race, more about being the greatest, one of the greatest of all time. That long lasting legacy is how I approached it.
Front runner mentality. Oh man, I'm all fired up over here now. I'm ready to go like run through a wall here. This is so good. This is so good because I'm not even going to comment on that because that's like mic drop right there. Like just beautiful, beautiful way to sum everything up.
Yeah.
Man, just leave the legacy, go after it, do the things, focus on the things that like have that amazing perspective, focus on things you can control, like take advantage of it. Oh,
you don't know how long you're going to be able to do it, you know, so
you don't know how long. Yes.
Do it all.
That's one thing too. Like when and every athlete goes through this and there's different things that make it happen. But at some point, the playing days or running days or whatever sport you play, they will shift. It will be done. It'll look way different than it was.
And that, to your point, are not just as an athlete, but as a person, will lead to that next step.
Yes.
You know, and it will set up what you do next. And so many people forget that they're a person. They just focus on the athlete part. And after things are over, they're like, all right, what do I do now? Who am I? It's very hard for some people where they need that professional help because they don't know who they are outside of athletics.
Yes.
So it's important to make sure that who you are as a person is meshing with who you represent yourself and who you are aspiring to be as an athlete.
Well said. All right. I'm going to be aware of time.
Yeah, it's been good.
You're a busy guy. I know you got meetings, stuff like that. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way? Is it LinkedIn? Is it
LinkedIn? Yeah, I'm old school, man. LinkedIn. I look at Facebook just for, entertainment, but you want to connect with me, LinkedIn, first name, Trinity, last name Gray with an A. Happy to connect with anyone. And I appreciate the opportunity, man.
This is great. Well, we'll stay on it for a minute afterwards, Trinity, but I can't thank you enough for spending time with me today. Honestly, I was so looking forward to this. And, I get into a lot of these interviews and like you and I talked briefly, like on the phone, I don't know what, a couple weeks ago or whenever that was. And so you kind of know when you do research on people, but you don't know. And
Yeah.
man, every single time, and this is no exception. Like I'm just blown away. Like whatever expectation I had was obliterated because of your amazing just story, and I don't know, just pouring into me and pouring into everyone watching and listening today. So I can't thank you enough.
All right, it's great opportunity.
Awesome. So everyone watching right now, thank you as well for being here with Trinity and I today. And I hope you were taking notes. Go back, as I say every time, listen to this, get out your pen, get out your paper, and take one thing away and start taking action upon that thing. That's going to get you where you want to go. So please share this with your family, friends, coworkers, colleagues, teammates, team, whoever you might be interacting with in your life. And can't wait to see you on the next interview. Have a great day, everybody.